Okay, chapter 12, part 3. We should wrap it up and get to the questions. Okay, so given everything we've talked about and the economic approach that says that crime, even though it may be related to someone with twisted morals, people still respond to incentives. So therefore, you could think of a demand curve for crime by the criminal relating to the amount of crime on the horizontal axis, the punishment on the vertical axis. And obviously here, not only is it downward sloping in the normal way, so higher punishments lead to reduction activity, the elasticity of this curve would matter a lot because if it's quite vertical, then even a small increase in punishment will do almost nothing if the demand curve is pretty inelastic. But if it's pretty elastic, then even a small increase in punishment will dramatically reduce the amount of criminal activity that takes place. Okay, when we combine our notion of benefits, and we're thinking about things both from the perspective of the crook, okay, they're responding to benefits and costs, and then we think about society and what society wants to do about it. There is a trade-off here between the benefits, the marginal benefits associated with reducing crime and the marginal costs associated with that. This is the same trap that you might fall in as we had on the last exam with my question, you can never have too much safety. Well, and that's with regards to torts and precaution and stuff like that. Similarly, if we said you can never have too much crime, is equally a false statement, as you're going to see, because again, it's at what price do you want to reduce crime to even lower and lower levels, and is it worth doing? Okay, so the diagram that we have that can illustrate this looks identical, because it is, to the diagram that those of you who have taken environmental economics may have seen, where here we're looking at the amount of pollution control. And aside from that, it really is the identical analysis. But what we have here, we're measuring dollars on the vertical axis as usual, and here we're measuring the amount of crime reduction. So it's not the amount of crime, but it's 1 minus that. It's the amount of crime reduction. So we've got 0% here, means you do nothing about the criminal activity, no rules, no laws, no nothing. 100% would be where you try to completely eliminate crime, okay? Now let's take a look at the curves. We've got the marginal social benefit curve, which you can see is downward sloping. In other words, if the marginal benefit of reducing crime even a little bit in a crime-infested neighborhood might be pretty valuable, okay? And as we reduce crime further, we have positive benefits from it, but the marginal benefits are getting less and less and less. So if the amount of crime in a city is, okay, someone throws an egg at a car once in a while, or they dent your mailbox and stuff like that, even though we don't like it, the cost associated with that would be pretty minimal. And that you have a city with no murders, but once in a while someone gets mugged. Again, there's still a value to reducing it, but it's not as great as other things you can do to reduce crime. At the same token, we have to compare the marginal social benefits of reducing crime with the marginal social costs of achieving that. And that's going to, of course, increase, and probably increase exponentially as we get down to zero crime, which is a 100% crime reduction, because it may be virtually impossible, even in states that have very strict rules against all sorts of even minor criminal activity. Think of Singapore as an example. To completely reduce crime down to zero would be probably economically infeasible. But to reduce small amounts of crime, there's probably simple things you can do. And then to reduce it further and further and further, you may need more cops on the beat, more surveillance cameras, incarcerate even more people or whatever. And the costs obviously would get higher and higher and higher because if you have a police force and a certain level of criminal activity, to reduce it even further, what are you going to do? Hire even more cops just to get a little bit of a reduction in crime? Those marginal costs are going to be zooming at some point. And so when we compare the marginal benefits and marginal costs, we get D star as the optimal level of crime reduction. Anything between 0 and D star, it's economically efficient to do more to reduce crime. Anything beyond? No. In fact, you are taking away more things of value from other sources than the benefits you're reaping from additional reductions in crime. So any amount of crime is too much is a false statement. You should understand why. All right, let's take a look at the questions at the end of the chapter. We start with question number 2. All right, and this is on page 458. Explain why county